All right, let's dive in. Today we're taking a look at iron yoga. I bet you're picturing like some super intense workout, right?
Yeah, it does have a certain ring to it, doesn't it?
But it's actually this pretty interesting combo of yoga and get this strength training.
Yeah, you bring in some light dumbbells to your regular yoga practice,
And that way you get the best of both worlds. The mindfulness, the flexibility of yoga.
and you add that targeted muscle work you get from lifting weights.
We've been digging into this source, a document called Iron Yoga Combine Yoga and Strength Training .pdf.
It's a great resource, really lays out the foundation and the method behind this workout.
So what we really want to do today for you listening is break down iron yoga. What is it, really? What are the core principles behind it? And how could someone actually start doing it?
Yeah, give you a good overview so you can decide if it's for you.
One of the coolest things about this, to me, is the story of how it came about. You know, the author's own journey.
It's a pretty interesting backstory, actually.
The author comes from this background of super intense endurance sports, specifically Ironman triathlons.
Wow, that's serious athleticism right there.
So you'd think someone who can do that would be like a natural at anything fitness related, right?
If you assume, yeah.
But get this, they actually struggled with some of the basics of yoga.
Really? Like what?
The breathing techniques, the flexibility, even just balancing in some of the poses.
Shows you that even elite athletes have areas they need to work on.
Totally. It's not just about transferring skills from one discipline to another.
Right. Different things require different approaches.
So picture this. The authors just finished an Ironman race, right?
Okay, feeling totally drained, I imagine.
And they're in Warrior Two pose. You know that one with the deep lunge?
Oh, yeah, classic.
And their legs are on fire, that good kind of muscle burn.
So they're really feeling it in their legs.
And then they have this thought, how can I get that same feeling in my upper body?
That's a fascinating question, actually.
That's what sparked the whole thing, that curiosity about engaging the arms and shoulders with the same intensity.
And that led them to adding the dumbbells to the yoga poses.
Exactly. And it's cool to see that something so personal, you know, this specific feeling they were looking for, ended up turning into a whole new fitness approach.
Makes you realize that limitations or challenges can often lead to innovation.
Totally. And it's not like they just came up with this all on their own. When you look at the acknowledgement section, you see a whole bunch of people who helped make it happen. Family, the team at Rodale who helped with publishing.
So a real team effort.
Oh, yeah. There's even this guy, Eric Neuhaus, who's credited as a co-author. And this woman, Laleli Lopez, who helped with getting the word out to the media. Then you have a bunch of fitness directors from different gyms and stuff who offer teaching opportunities.
It takes a village, as they say.
For real. And there's this whole creative side, too. And Uncle Duty is thanked for the logo and the website design. Daryl Estrine did the photography. Lori Roth. And, get this, Nike provided clothes and mats for the pictures. Drew Hong is the guy behind the actual website. And then there are all these other people who gave advice and support along the way.
Wow, that's a lot of names. Shows how much collaboration goes into something like this.
Yeah, and it's not just names on a page. It gives you this sense of community and how everyone's contribution made a difference.
It definitely adds a personal touch to the story.
Right. And last but not least, the author gives a shout out to his wife, Amy, for being a huge inspiration. And, you know, she's got a lot of fitness knowledge herself.
Makes you realize that behind any big project, there's often a support system and inspiration from loved ones.
Okay, so now that we know the story behind it, let's actually get into what iron yoga is.
Right, let's break it down.
At its core, it takes the flow and poses of power yoga, you know, where you're moving more continuously, and adds in these weight training moves with light dumbbells.
And that emphasis on light is really important. This isn't about turning yoga into a heavy lifting session.
Exactly. The goal is to get all those benefits, the physical, mental, and that feeling of connection that you often get with yoga.
Yeah, that holistic approach.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, how does it achieve that full body engagement? Because people often think of yoga as, more about flexibility and maybe lower body strength.
That's a good point. What sets iron yoga apart is how it brings in exercises for your upper body, too. Things like shoulder overhead press, triceps kickback, chest fly, that kind of stuff.
So you're adding in upper body work while you're already holding a yoga pose.
Yeah. And your legs are active in that pose, and your core is working to keep you stable. So you're hitting a lot of different muscle groups at the same time.
Multitasking at its finest.
Right. So what are the actual benefits, according to the source material?
Well, let's see what they highlight.
First off, it says you can improve lean muscle mass and boost your metabolism.
Makes sense. More muscle means you burn more calories even when you're not working out.
Right, it's a big plus for weight management. Another big one is increased flexibility and range of motion. And they emphasize how important that is, not just for athletes, but for everyday life.
Yeah, like being able to reach that top shelf or bend down without feeling stiff.
Exactly. And then there's this whole mental aspect too. It says iron yoga can sharpen mental focus and concentration.
Also,
The idea is that the combo of moving and that controlled breathing brings more oxygen and blood flow to your brain.
you get a mental boost along with the physical workout.
Yep. And of course, we can't forget the breathing techniques.
Yoga is all about that breath work, right?
Totally. And the specific technique they highlight here is ujjayi breath. It's super helpful for reducing stress, which, can have a huge impact on our health overall.
Stress is a big factor for a lot of people, so learning to manage it can make a big difference.
It's not just about feeling zen either. The source talks about how ujjayi breath can actually help build stronger, more defined muscles because it slows down your movements and forces you to work against that resistance.
That's pretty interesting. So the way you breathe directly affects the muscle work.
Exactly. And then there's the whole functional strength and muscular endurance aspect. It specifically says iron yoga can really help with your legs and core, which is great for posture and gives you a good foundation for other activities like running or cycling.
Having a strong core is crucial for pretty much any sport or activity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And last but not least, the source mentions balance and symmetry in the body. The idea is that iron yoga can help restore that natural equilibrium.
It's about feeling aligned, both physically and mentally.
Exactly. So, okay, we've talked about what it is and the benefits. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, like what kinds of poses and movements are actually involved.
Yeah, let's see what it looks like in practice.
So there are four main categories of yoga poses they use. The first is standing poses, like chair pose, tree pose, warrior two, crescent lunge.
Those are some of the most well-known ones.
Right, and they're really about grounding you, building strength and stability, especially in the lower body.
Feeling rooted to the earth.
Yep. Then you have seated poses like seated wide angle sequence, seated forward bend, bound angle. These are more about that internal focus meditation, and they require a lot of flexibility in your lower back and spine.
So a shift from external strength to internal flexibility.
Exactly. Then there's prone poses. That's where you're lying face down. They're great for strengthening your shoulders and back. A couple
Yeah.
of examples they give are bird dog, flying airplane, and locust pose.
Those can be pretty tough, especially if you're not used to them.
They are. And finally, you have the supine poses. These are done lying on your back.
A bit more relaxing.
Yeah, like reclined twist. While the prone poses are about building strength, supine poses are for relaxation, releasing tension.
So it's a well-rounded practice with a good mix of effort and recovery.
And on top of the yoga poses, you've got the weight training aspect.
Right, those light dumbbells.
Iron yoga uses two main types of movements with those. The first is isolation movements. These target just one muscle group, like your biceps or triceps.
So really zeroing in on a specific area.
Yeah, usually it involves just one joint moving, like your elbow in a concentration curl or a triceps kickback.
And that helps with, like, shaping and toning those muscles.
Exactly. The other type is compound movements. These use two or more joints at once and work bigger muscle groups. A couple examples are chest press and lat pull down.
So those are more efficient because you're working more muscles at the same time.
Exactly. They're considered more bang for your buck.
It's like a 2-for-1 deal, but for your muscles.
Okay, so we've got the poses, the movements. Now, what are the big ideas, the principles that tie it all together?
I'm intrigued. What's the secret sauce of iron yoga?
The source talks about four main principles, which they call the four connections. It's all about connecting your mind, your breath, and your body throughout the practice. The first one is connect mind with breath.
Sounds almost philosophical.
It kind of is, and a big part of this is the breathing technique, ujjayi.
Ujjayi, isn't that the one where you make that ocean sound?
Yeah, some people even say it sounds like Darth Vader breathing.
Uh-huh. I can see that.
But seriously, it's a very specific breath that starts deep in your belly and goes all the way through your nose. You keep your mouth closed, and you should actually feel the breath at the back of your throat.
So it's very intentional breath, not just your everyday breathing.
Right. And here's where it gets interesting. They contrast it with how you'd normally breathe while lifting weights.
Which is usually exhale on the exertion, right?
Oh, yeah. But in iron yoga, the idea is to keep tension on the muscle the whole time. There's not really a rest phase like in traditional weightlifting.
So how does Ujjayi fit into that?
Well, they say that taking these slow, deep breaths naturally makes you move slower.
So everything's more controlled.
Yeah. And when you move slower, you're actually holding the tension in the muscle for longer.
So it's about maximizing that muscle engagement.
Exactly. The second principle is connect breath with movement. This is all about syncing your breath with the exercise.
So your breath is like a guide for the movement.
Yep. It sets the rhythm and makes everything flow together. Then you've got connect mind with muscle. This is about being super aware of the specific muscle you're working before you even start moving, and you keep that focus throughout the exercise.
So it's not just mindless movement.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's about that mind-body connection. And finally, there's connect movement with static contraction. This is where it gets really unique.
Okay, what's the deal with this one?
You basically hold the muscle at its tightest point, that peak contraction, for 2 full breaths. So 1 inhale, 1 exhale.
That was intense.
It is. They say it really deepens that mind-muscle connection and intensifies the burn.
So you're really feeling it in the muscle.
For sure. And it's not about holding your breath during this part, but actually using your breath to enhance that contraction.
I imagine that takes some practice and control.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's say someone's listening to this and thinking, I want to try this iron yoga thing. What advice does the source give for getting started?
Yeah, what are the practical steps?
Well, first, they say you got to set some goals. What do you want to get out of iron yoga? Is it weight loss, stress relief, strength, overall fitness? Having those goals in mind helps you stay motivated.
Makes sense. Knowing your why gives you direction.
Then they talk about when to practice. They say there's no magic time, but you should wait about 90 minutes after a snack or 2 hours after a big meal.
So give your body time to digest before you start twisting and turning.
Yeah. They also mentioned that doing it in the morning on an empty stomach might be a good option for some people.
Early bird gets the iron yoga workout.
Ha! Exactly. And how often should you do it? They recommend starting with 2, maybe 3 times a week.
That seems reasonable. Build up gradually.
Yeah. And they're very clear that iron yoga is meant to be something you add to your routine, not replace everything else.
So it can complement your other workouts or yoga practice.
Yep. In fact, a lot of people find that it actually improves their performance in other activities like running or cycling.
That's interesting. Like cross-training, but with a yoga twist.
What about equipment? Do you need a ton of stuff?
Let's hope not.
No, it's
Yeah.
pretty minimal. You need a yoga mat, obviously. Then a set of light dumbbells. They say to start with 2 or 3 pounds.
Nothing too heavy.
Right. A mirror can be helpful, especially when you're starting out, so you can check your form. And of course, comfy clothes. You do it barefoot, just like regular yoga. Oh, and a quiet space where you won't be interrupted.
So pretty accessible for most people. You don't need a fancy gym membership or anything.
Yeah, any safety tips to keep in mind?
Definitely want to be safe when trying something new.
The biggest thing they emphasize is listening to your body. Never push yourself past your limits or into pain.
Yeah, that's crucial.
They make a point of saying that muscle burn is normal, even good, but joint pain is a bad sign.
Gotta know the difference.
Exactly. And they also talk about modifications. Pretty much every pose can be adjusted to fit different levels and limitations.
So it's adaptable for various needs.
Yeah. And they give some specific advice for things like back pain, pregnancy, or if you're older and need more support.
That's good to know. It makes it more accessible to a wider range of people.
Right. Okay, so now let's look at how all this actually plays out in a workout. They start with a warm-up sequence, which is designed to get all your muscles ready and help you connect with your body.
Sounds like a good way to ease into things.
Yeah, it's not jumping straight into the hard stuff. It starts with mountain pose to get you grounded and focused, then moves into chair pose to get your blood flowing.
Classic yoga poses.
Then, get this, they introduce high arm hammer curl pretty early on as a way to start practicing that static contraction technique we talked about.
Interesting. So you're already bringing in that strength element right from the warm-up.
Yep. And they emphasize coming back to mountain pose throughout the warm-up to recenter and focus on your breath.
It's like a reset button to make sure you're staying connected.
Then they go into specific iron yoga sequences. One example they give is the tree sequence, starting with the right leg.
Tree pose, that's the one where you stand on one leg. Right.
Yep. And it's interesting, they actually start the sequence with wrist curls, which you do in mountain pose. They say the wrists and forearms are often neglected, but they're super important for a lot of yoga poses and for avoiding injury.
Makes sense. You use your wrists for so much, it's easy to forget about them.
From there, you move into tree pose itself. They talk about the image of your foot being the roots of a tree and your arms being the branches.
That's a cool visualization.
Right. And they say it helps with body symmetry, focus, and even lung capacity. But of course, tree pose can be tricky, especially when you add the dumbbells.
I can imagine.
Uh-huh.
Balancing on one leg is hard enough as it is.
But that's where the challenge comes in. And while you're holding tree pose, you actually do some weight training moves. Things like shoulder overhead press, a lot of pull down, chest press.
Wow, so you're building strength while also working on balance?
Exactly. They really hammer home the importance of that balance and symmetry, both physically and mentally. They point out that most of us have a dominant side, and we need to work on our weaker side to prevent imbalances and injuries.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm definitely right side dominant.
Me too.
Okay.
Another sequence they describe is the power lunge sequence, again, starting with the right leg. This one combines a bunch of yoga poses like triangle, warrior two, side angle lunge, and crescent lunge with dumbbell exercises in each pose.
So it's a flow of movements.
Yeah, it's dynamic. And the focus here is on building leg strength and endurance. They talk a lot about using your breath to deepen into the poses without straining.
So it's not just about powering through the movements, but being mindful and controlled.
Right. And within each pose, they have specific weight movements. For example, in Warrior 2, you might do lateral raises and biceps curls. In side angle lunge, you might do a concentration curl. And in crescent lunge, you might do a full overhead lateral raise with an oblique twist.
That's a lot to coordinate.
It's definitely a workout for your body and your mind.
So you've got these strength-focused sequences, but are there any that are more pure yoga?
Yeah, they have sequences without dumbbells too, like Sun Salutation Sequence I.
Sun salutations, that's a classic yoga flow.
It is, and they say this particular sequence is great for rejuvenation, flexibility, and strength. It's all about that synchronized flow of breath and movement.
So a nice break from the weights while still getting a good workout.
And for those who are feeling adventurous, they have more challenging sequences too, like the single leg balance sequence.
Sounds like a test of balance.
It is. You've got poses like half moon, warrior three, eagle pose, and they even give modifications if some of the poses are too difficult.
So there's room for everyone to progress at their own pace.
Now, after all that hard work, you got to cool down. The source emphasizes that cool down is super important for relaxation and letting your mind settle.
Makes sense. You need that recovery time.
They focus on poses like reclined twist, seated forward bend, child's pose, and then they end with hero pose, which is a really relaxing posture. They say to hold it for a while to just let go of any tension.
I can almost feel myself relaxing just hearing about it.
Right. It's about coming back to that peaceful state.
And I'm curious, since the author comes from that endurance sports background, do they talk about how iron yoga can benefit athletes specifically?
They do. There's a whole section on iron yoga for sports. They basically say that iron yoga can help athletes in any sport without making you bulky.
So it's about building that lean, functional strength.
Yeah. And they talk about how the focus on breathing can increase your lung capacity and help you stay focused when things get tough.
Especially important in those high-intensity sports.
And they even touch on anxiety and stress that athletes deal with, saying that yoga breathing techniques can help manage those pre-competition nerves.
The mental game is just as important as the physical one.
Absolutely. And get this, they give these specific iron yoga fixes for common problems in different sports.
Like personalized tips.
Yeah. For runners, it's about stretching those tight leg muscles and using balancing poses for stability. For cyclists, it's about strengthening the back and stretching the lower body since they're hunched over so much.
I can see how that would be helpful.
And they even have advice for swimmers, tennis players, golfers, skiers, you name it.
Wow, that's really tailored advice.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into iron yoga, what's the big takeaway?
The main thing I'm getting is that iron yoga is this really unique blend of strength training and yoga. It's not just about the physical benefits, but also the mental focus, the breath work, the whole mind-body connection.
It's a holistic approach that can benefit pretty much anyone, from casual exercisers to serious athletes.
Exactly. And as always, this deep dive was created just for you, our listeners, based on the info you gave us.
So here's something to think about. How could you maybe incorporate some of these iron yoga principles into your own routine? Maybe pay more attention to your breath when you work out, or try adding some light weights to your yoga practice.
It could be a game changer for your fitness journey.
And if this whole approach appeals to you, we encourage you to check out the full source material. It goes into way more detail about the specific sequences and poses.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time.
See you then.